Hi, and welcome back to another episode of 5G Wireless Invasion. I'm Carolyn LaRocque, an environmental biologist living in Guilford, and today we're talking about the dark side. We're going to specifically talk about how the 5G technology was developed. It was actually developed decades ago by DARPA, which, if you don't know what that stands for, it's the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and they develop all sorts of technology for military applications. However, the 5G, which is really in essence a very high frequency microwave spectrum technology, that has never been used before in civilian applications other than our microwave ovens, essentially, because it really didn't have any practical application. So a lot of us were surprised to hear that they were going to use it in the telecommunication industry because it has never been considered a reliable frequency to use. It's easily interrupted, as we discussed in the first and second episodes. It isn't a real reliable source of communication from people to people, and that's really the crux of it. If you spend any time looking into the technology itself, you'll see that 5G is really for things talking to things. People don't need 5G, but things need 5G, and they want to track basically everything we buy, everything we do, for money purposes, essentially. So we're going to get into the dark side. So first, let's start with what it is. The technology itself is a directed energy weapon. We're going to look at several different kinds, and they will just be cycling through as I discuss them. But there's a few different applications. You'll recognize the equipment that the Army and different branches use that are for land terrestrial use. They're like on trucks and different vehicles, and they have a big flat panel that looks sort of like a satellite dish, but it's flat, and it resembles a lot of the 4G and the 5G type of antenna systems that you see, whether they're mounted on a cell tower or a building. But the flat, square, boxy look is exactly the same on these vehicles as it is on the 5G hardware that they're going to be putting on the poles and streetlights and buildings and everywhere around us. But they'll be much smaller. But you'll look, if you notice on the vehicles, especially the ones called the active denial systems, they are mounted in such a way that they have a very focused point where the beam forms, and then the whole unit, whether it's the truck that moves or the structure hardware itself that is the beam producer, that is capable of being directed at crowds. So whether it's used in a non-lethal way to control crowds, they can make you disperse an area. Because what happens when it hits your skin, when these beams in the active denial system, the directed energy weapons, when they hit your skin, it feels like you're on fire. It heats up your skin, primarily because it affects your sweat glands, and it's like your sweat glands are boiling. So that is, really the same technology that 5G is used by the military on these active denial systems. I can't say enough how disturbing it is for me as a parent and a member of the community to think that these systems are going to be all around us. And if they were to be used, in a time of crisis or anything, all they really have to do is boost the power on these cell towers, and they could turn these beams into a lot stronger, almost probably to military strength. So if they really wanted to clear a street, I'm betting that they could. Now, I haven't really researched that and been able to get a hold of somebody who could answer these questions for me, but I am working on it. I really just don't think that there's any real significance in having 5G technology used for our Internet of Things and our communication system. I just don't see that the benefits outweigh the cost, the risks of the detrimental health effects and all of the environmental damage that's going to come of it. So not only are we going to have these 5G grid infrastructure built all around us on the ground, there's also going to be 20,000 satellites in low Earth orbit that are going to be basically used to track everything that you buy. Everything, every piece of clothing, anything you can buy is going to have one of those little chips in it, and it's going to be trackable all over the globe, no matter where you go. And that is what they really want, I believe, is to be able to track everything, and they're going to be able to know everything about you. I mean, if you have a house, a smart house and a smart car, and you're wearing smart wearables and all this, they are going to know everything from your biometrics to what you eat, to what you watch on TV, to who you're talking to what you look at on the computer, everything. They're going to know everything about you. And if you're okay with that, that's fine. I am not okay with that. And it's not that I'm doing anything illegal. I just don't think it's any of their business, and I can see a lot of ways that it's going to be misused. For instance, even on Facebook, I got off Facebook since the first episode, because every time they upgrade the programming into Facebook, I have to reset all my security settings. I have to shut off the facial recognition tracking that just is in their default settings. If you don't know that you have that in Facebook, you should, because it's facial recognition software, and it's a default setting in Facebook now, along with all sorts of other security things. It takes a long time to go in and reset those every time. So I just got off of it. If you do want to ask me a question or make a comment, I have my email address is available on the credits screen or the end resource slide, one or the other. You'll be able to get that. So anyway, let me go on here. If you want to know, and understand more about the active denial systems and how this technology was used, there are a couple documents you can look at, but also you can probably get some information just by asking anyone that you know who was following World War II. They used these systems in World War II, and there's a lot of reports that I have come across where they talk about it boiled their eyes like eggs. And, that's one of the environmental and health hazards with the technology, is our eyes do not have any natural preventative, to block microwaves. So just like the LED lights in our new street lights and all these bulbs everyone's using now because it's better for the environment, it's way worse for your eyes. It causes macular degeneration. So with all of these small cells of microwave beams all around us, people are going to be losing their eyesight. So is your high-speed download and your smart refrigerator and your smart car and all that worth going blind? Because I don't think so. Okay, so let's move on. If you want to get more information about these weapons of mass destruction, which is what they are, you can look up a document. I have it on the last screen too, so you can screenshot it. But it's called Silent Weapons for Silent Wars. It's an operations research technical manual, and then the number of it, the code is TM-SW7905.1. It was published in May of 1979. The docket number is 74-1120. Another one is called the City Climate Action Plans and Wildlands Project, and in that one they describe how they plan to move us all into resilient cities, which now, their term is smart cities. So everyone, wants to be modern and have all these conveniences, which the conveniences are wonderful. And if they could provide them to us in a safer manner and a more secure manner, I wouldn't be complaining about it. But if you read either of these documents, especially the first one, Silent Weapons for Silent Wars, initially this was, this technology was developed for covert operations. They could launch an attack and people would be burning and having to leave areas, and, they could target individuals in a crowd, all sorts of things they could use in the military application. But now we're talking about putting this on the streets and in our schools and everywhere, and I'm just not feeling that, okay? Because if you really research it, which I have, you'll also know that it can be used for population control, behavior control, even the population growth for one. Because honestly, the way this technology works, it is literally going to sterilize our children and our children's children. So if you don't believe me, trust me. At the end of this episode, the resources section will have information for you, and you need to look it up if you think I'm exaggerating, because I am not. Okay, it is a sterilization program, and it also is going to be used in ways to control your behavior. And if you want an example of that, just look up what's going on in China right now. They're using 5G. They've already got it rolled out, and they are using it in order to score you, and it's called social status score tracking. So everyone knows about your credit scores, okay? Well, this is sort of like your credit score, but it has to do with everything that your behavior, where you go, where you sit. Are you playing too many video games? Are you whatever. They actually, it's like Pokemon Go, except it's based on your behavior. Are you conforming to what the government in China wants you to be doing? So if you look online, okay, and you see yourself in a video, you're going to have a little bubble of numbers, a score over your head, just like in Pokemon Go. And you're going to have a rating based on your social behavior and economic value and whatever other parameters. It's ridiculous, and it's so invasive. I just can't believe that anybody can't see that coming, because a lot of us are seeing that that's what's coming. So let me turn. I'm going to give you another example. Let's look at all the sources of electromagnetic frequencies and radiation and the 5G that is around us right now. Okay, so we all have cell phones that are 4G. There's cell towers that are 4G, and we understand that those are not, good for us, but they're not as hazardous as the 5G. So we've been tolerating them, but there's definitely a background of radiation in our lives already, and it has been for a while. So certain things we don't really always think about are the Wi-Fi systems and the devices that we have, the video game systems, our cars. We've looked at, we know that regular EMF comes off of office equipment, all kinds of things like that. Even the solar panels that you put on your house, people think they're trying to be green and doing something proactive and, helping the planet. But what you don't realize when you put solar panels on your roof is that you may be creating an environmental, a bad environmental condition in your home and exposing your family to excessive levels of electromagnetic radiation. And it will accumulate in there as well. So the other areas we've looked at is airline cabins. So of course they have Wi-Fi, and once everyone's using 5G, well, there's going to be microwaves binging around in there. Not to mention the solar exposure you get just from being up in the air and this radiation coming from the sun. So a lot of people have been squawking about the TSA scanners, because the new TSA scanners where you have to walk in and hold your arms up and it scans you, those are also using microwave technology just like the 5G. And so people have been concerned about that. And I'm thinking, as a biologist, I'm like, well, yes, you're getting exposed to radiation, but the amount you're getting just from being up in the altitude in the plane, the exposure of radiation from the sun is, by comparison, way more important than the TSA scanner, but you are getting it from that. So once we switch over to the 5G, as we've reviewed, you're going to have a lot of extra exposures. You're going to have street lights, utility poles, cables. These, small cell equipment are going to be mounted inside and outside of buildings. They're going to be pinging you in your car as you're moving around in your community. So you're going to have a lot more, not to mention your smart stuff in your home and the wearables. Everybody's all addicted to their wearables. And again, there's an example where you're doing something that is to help improve your health. But you know what? The wearables, because they are low powered, they're not tested. There's no pre-market testing. There's no testing of that or most of the stuff in your home after you buy it either. So you really don't know, and they have no data on long-term exposure to these wearables and some of the devices in your home. So that's a huge issue. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that, the telecom industry has literally gotten us addicted to our devices, the games, the conveniences. And, they're really about a decade ago, if not longer, there was a huge push to get just regular Wi-Fi in schools, okay? And, it was a convenience thing to get everyone connected. They were giving the devices away, giving them out to the students, and even before 5G, okay, this boost in Wi-Fi exposure to our kids and our teachers and people who work in the schools is very significant. And we don't realize at the time, if you're not a biologist and you're not reading about the technology or learning any of the exposures, how many people read the packaging and fine print on their cell phone even? You don't realize you are sterilizing your children, and you already were doing it just by having Wi-Fi in the school and your home. Now you're taking it to the next level. The next level is going to be much faster. I mean, it is going to be so significant. And the reason I'm so concerned about it is because the FCC they are forcibly deploying the 5G technology across the globe. So not only just the ground-based grid infrastructure, but then you have the space-based 20,000 satellites. So you literally will not be able to escape it. And I'm sorry, that is a crime against humanity. I have not consented to that. Nobody that I know has consented to that level of exposure. And in my opinion, and many legal opinions, that it is in breach of the Nuremberg Code. And if you don't know what that is, you need to look it up. But it came about after World War II and all the testing that the Germans did, the Nazis did on their prisoners and whatnot. And so essentially you are not to be tested on without your knowledge, without your consent, and full awareness of all the side effects and possible outcomes of the testing. And so in my opinion, because the 5G has not been fully long-term tested, okay, we are literally an experiment, okay, and because it's an experiment on a huge scale like this, it is in breach of the Nuremberg Code. And I believe that it is a crime against humanity, and I'm not the only one. There are thousands of people across the globe actively working to stop 5G. If you ever want to see something that might tip your mind in this way, is to go on YouTube and look up Tom Wheeler's speech. He's the FCC chairman, or he was at the time. And it is beyond insanity. It really is. Just a couple of highlights for you. He goes in and does a whole speech, and he's very aggressive about it. Like it had this attitude like, don't even think about trying to fight it because this is going through whether you like it or not. This was his attitude. Okay. He discusses how it's going to be an ultra high frequency radiation in the range of 24 to 100 gigahertz, but up to 300 gigahertz coming off of the macro cell towers. So in your handheld devices, you could have up to 100 gigahertz that you are going to be exposed to in your home or in your car or your handhelds. And then anything on the the macro, the next level up, is going to be even higher frequency. They are aimed and amplified signals, meaning they have control of where it goes, and it will track your 5G device, any of the small cell antennas out there. They will be actively seeking each other. So you are going to be in the way of those beams. Okay, but anyway, let's not get sidetracked here. One of his key points was that it's going to rake in billions of dollars. And he comes right out and says there's no standards, there's no testing, and no monitoring, and that's how they're going to streamline it and get it out here so that the U.S. can be first. Well, they're not first. China already has it, but anyway. It's going to be he even says it's going to be a shared infrastructure with the military and satellites. Okay, he says everything must have a microchip and an IP. There's going to be total saturation of 5G, and it's going to be a fast-track deployment. He actually states that in his speech, and if you see the way that he says it, I think that it will convince you it's not going to be a good thing. It seems like it would for some of the conveniences and the capabilities, but I think in the long run, everybody's going to regret it. Just for an example, the cell phones we have now, they give off or use 2 watts of power. The 5G phones in the cars are going to be giving off, like your exposure is going to be 20 watts, and that's how much energy it's using. And then the stationary hubs for wireless broadband, so that would be a building Wi-Fi system or a small cell tower, that's going to be 300 watts. And then the macro base stations that are be up high, the bigger ones with more power, they're going to use 30,000 watts for every 100 megahertz of spectrum, and that also correlates to 300,000 watts for every gigahertz of spectrum. Okay, so that is tens of hundreds of times more powerful than the current base station towers that our 4G and the LTE is running off of. So you need to realize the significance in the intensity, and also the fact that the waves are millimeters. So anything up to 30 gigahertz in the frequency spectrum uses a 10 millimeter wave frequency or greater. Once you get above 30 gigahertz, like what the international exposure limit is up to 300 watts. Not watts, I think they meant gigahertz. Anyway, the 1998 standards allow exposure limits up to 300 gigahertz. Okay, so that is, and I forget what the time factor is. I get a conversion table from them, which I'm waiting for. But in terms of the wavelength frequency, between 30 and 300 gigahertz, the wavelengths are just millimeter. They're the smallest, fastest, highest frequency millimeter wavelength spectrum in the microwave spectrum. Okay, so the frequency, because of its small millimeter length, and it's very high powered, it's very intense, that's why it can't travel as far. The 4G uses a bigger wave frequency, it can go farther. The millimeter waves, they can't go that far unless you boost them with a lot of power. So a lot of these monopoles that you see with the 5G, the big macro towers and the existing cell towers that have 5G on them, the 5G on those bigger towers is pumping out a lot more powerful microwaves. So, the issue is not just our health, but the environment. And even, if you're going to get as petty as your property values, once people know about this, if you have a 5G antenna in front of your house on the street, your property value is going to go down. Okay, it's going to be looked at as a high risk property, especially in the cities where it's going to be everywhere. People are not going to want to live there. They might think they want to for all the smart stuff, but once they start getting cancer, they'll be leaving. So anyway, I wanted to show you another thing here. We have a couple of other reports besides the resources that I have listed on the last slide here. I wanted to draw your attention to the January 9th, 2019, it's called the Millennium Report. You can look it up. It actually has its own website. It's called the millenniumreport.com. And it gives you so many references to everything that I've been discussing in these episodes and more, that if you want to follow up on anything that I've said, you will be able to find it in here. It covers everything from the hardware technology to the software, to the environmental and health exposures, and basically how everything will work, the power, the frequency, the effects on DNA that we talked about in the last couple episodes, everything you would want to know. And it even lists all of the wildlife that are affected, the wildlife and nature, the trees, the mammals, the insects, the amphibians, everything, and it gives you references so you can look up the effects, what they were, how devastating is it, and it gives you a huge list of health effects, everything we talked about before, the cancer, there's references for everything, the miscarriages, infertility, memory issues, everything we talked about in the last episode. So it's a very, very good document. I highly recommend it. The resources at the end are going to give you the following websites: the lessemf.com website, which is where you can actually order a lot of like the meters to test for, books and information that to research it more, as well as shielding and clothing and other things to protect you against regular EMF and EMR, the radiation, and then also for 5G. So then some other websites that I give you are Kevin Modis's website, which is 5ginformation.net. And then concerning the sterilization and the mind control and some of the other issues that we have briefly mentioned here about 5G, it's in the fullertoninformer.com/apple666. That's on the last slide. And that's where it's going to really give you a good history of how Wi-Fi in schools has affected a whole generation. And I think I mentioned a documentary in the last one called Generation Zapped, which also discusses that. And then one of the real showstoppers is Deborah Tavares' website called stopthecrime.net. She gets into the dark side in a lot deeper than we are in this episode, because I don't want to send people off the deep end and freaking out. This is something that we still have time to deal with. And yes, it is dark, and yes, it can seem like it could be used for the complete subjugation of the human race. It really could. And so we need to make sure that doesn't happen. So and I do have the two documents, the Silent Weapons for Silent Wars and the City Climate Action Plans and Wild Lands Project. Those documents are also featured on the last slide.